Crayfish can be found creeping around all over Arizona, but the state is not their native home.
Back in the 1940s and 1950s, they were brought in as bait for smallmouth bass and catfish. They were stocked in some of our larger reservoirs and rivers. They were also put into some of the irrigation ditches and canals to control the aquatic vegetation. The problem with crayfish is they don't stay where we put them. They move into our more natural habitats.
And they make a mess out of Arizona's waterways.
They're omnivores. They will eat pretty much everything. And if there's not enough out there to eat, the crayfish will eat each other. And that affects a lot of our native species. Our fish, frogs, garter snakes, bird species are even affected because they're eating all the aquatic food base, the insects and the snails that are out there. They'll eat the vegetation that's there that helps keeps the shoreline stable. And then you start getting a lot more siltation because they're very notorious for burrowing into the muddy banks. And so they do start to affect the water quality. It makes it more murky.
Simply put, crayfish are bad news, but they're also really good to eat. In fact, we'll show you how to make this dish later in the video. Summer is the best time to catch crayfish, and in August, a group of folks from Game & Fish visited Goldwater Lake near Prescott to show us how it's done.
This is an area that is known for having lots of good fishing and crayfish. So today we're going to do some crayfish trapping. And I want to talk about some of the traps that we have available here. These are one of the commercial-made box traps. Real easy to use, also very efficient. You can load bait in the back. Go ahead and use a spring clip to seal it all up. And then you got this top handle where you can deploy a tether to shoreline and be able to set it in deep. And the crayfish are going to climb up into the ramp and then drop into this back trap here. If anybody is into backpacking and want to be able to carry a lot of traps with a very minimal amount of space, these collapsible minnow traps or crayfish traps work really nice. They're also very lightweight mesh. This is more of a cylindrical funnel trap, typical of most minnow traps or crayfish traps. This one's different in that it usually has a larger aperture on both ends. One of the last of the commercially made traps is this umbrella trap. And this is one that's fairly large that has a lot of openings for the crayfish to come on in, get into the middle where there's bait, and then there's a place for you to get into it and be able to extract the crayfish out. This last type of trap is what we call a two-ring crab pot trap. And the way these work is you'll be setting them down into the water with the bobber hanging up. So you got bait in the middle, and then the crayfish will crawl onto the top, and then at that point you'll use a dip net and hook pole to try to pull it off the bottom. Some of the old school ways of being able to catch crayfish are as simple as some bacon or hot dog on a string, or you can use fishing poles. We're gonna go ahead and bait up a bunch of traps. Hot dogs, bacon, chicken bones, rib bones. They will eat most anything, especially even some cut bait fish. We're gonna start deploying them around the margins of the lake. We're gonna be looking for areas that have a lot of rocky habitat, cover for the crayfish. Those are places where the crayfish are gonna be. All crayfish traps have to be 3 feet or less in any particular dimension. Anything larger than that is illegal. With a state fishing license, you can catch unlimited numbers of crayfish year-round.
If you plan to leave your trap unattended, be sure to attach a waterproof ID tag with your name, address, and the number of your fishing license. It's the law. After about an hour and a half, it's time to check the traps.
If you want to take crayfish alive, you got to make sure that they're buried under a lot of ice.
In most cases, it's illegal to possess live crayfish anywhere other than the body of water where you caught them. So make sure you know the rules before you take them anywhere.
Put them in a Ziploc bag, bury under lots of ice, because it's not legal to be transporting crayfish from the point that you captured them. We don't want them getting out and invading other locations.
Female 38.
Male 41.
The biologists catalog the sex and size of each crayfish they caught.
Female 38.
Male 50.
By tracking this data over time, they'll have a better idea if efforts to shrink the population are working.
Male 40.
Oh my gosh!
A saltwater soak helps wash away the grit and grime to get the crayfish ready for cooking.
We had quite a rainstorm at the end of the day, so we're back here on a different day. Caught some more crayfish and just wanted to take you through how we're going to process those. The first thing we need to do is dispatch all of our crayfish. So likely a lot of these crayfish have already died from being underneath the ice. What you want to do is take the crayfish and just take a good sturdy knife. What you're looking for is right here at the base of the head and the thorax there. Is place the tip of your knife right there, and you're just slicing right down the middle of their head. And that finishes them off pretty quickly. It's the fastest, humane way to dispatch. Now the next phase we're going to go to, like I said, is deveining the crayfish and then taking the tail, separating the tail from the body. All these crayfish have 5 little fins here on their tail. You grab that center fin, snap in one direction and then the other, you pull the vein right out. You want to grab up here, this last section of their tail, and just kind of twist and pull. Separate that tail out. So now this next part, what I do is I lay the crayfish tail flat, and a lot of times what I'll do is I just put the edge of my fingernail or whatnot just to be able to hold it in place, because what you're doing is putting pressure and rolling your way through the crayfish, and it squeezes the meat right out of the tail, and have a nice little chunk of crayfish tail meat here. So we ended up with about a half a pound of crayfish tail meat. This recipe here is just my version of a Spanish tapas dish. They usually do it with shrimp. But so we're gonna do the same thing. We'll start you wanna get your pot on heat, about medium-high heat. And to it, we start with olive oil and some butter. Get that starting to melt. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm going to add the red pepper flakes. And this is kind of an optional thing if you want. I think it adds to the flavor, just to kind of give it a little kick. Just starting to bubble with some heat on the outside. And so I'm going to add the garlic. And we're just going to kind of saute it a little bit, maybe about a minute or two, just to see, just till it starts getting fragrant. We can really smell that garlic coming through. It's like our rain's coming back. We're gonna beat it here. It's starting to smell really good. So I'll add the crayfish at this point. I'm gonna add some of this smoked paprika on top of it. And some lemon juice. We'll just stir this up. And the crayfish will change. You'll see it changes from that translucent color to near white. We got that paprika to give it a little bit more color. And what I'll do is I'm going to add just a couple of pinches of salt and some pepper. It's always hard to tell you exactly how much salt and pepper because it's usually the taste. It's smelling really good here. It's a little spicy, it's a little garlicky. That smoked paprika adds a nice dimension to it. And then the fresh parsley is gonna kind of add just a little bit of that brightness to it. And like I said, always best served with just some really nice fresh crusty bread. So you can have some on there and soak up some of this wonderful sauce in here. And once they're cooked all the way through, you're pretty much done at this point and are ready to plate.
And there you have it, Spanish crayfish tapas. Now grab your license, get outside, and
Catch crayfish!